to talk and share what they're doing, what their questions are. Really, if we need to get into a deep dive, and I've got some ability to do some screen sharing here in the Zoom. I think it's so anybody attending can do a screen share if we need to. So if we need to dig in and show any settings to anything or how we set up the quiz bowl stuff, we can get to that question and get those answered. So we want it to be as much question driven, what you guys want as possible. Although we've got, you know, some things prepared to share with you, obviously more directed to what you need is best. And I know that things are moving. I'm, you know, was just talking with people at CE today about using some of their new Ready assessment feature in my testing, because last year I used Schoology, and I don't know if they've turned on the free version of Schoology again yet or not. I know they hadn't in the fall. So that's how I did my testing online before. I'm looking at doing my online testing maybe with Ready assessment. So we have Andrea Mozo from CE that will join us at the end of the call to maybe share some information about that tool. So I wanted to just give it to Rosanna first, if you maybe want to lead any discussion of what things are going to look like at the national level, or any information from the national level you wanted to share, and then we can kind of get to Kathy. And I know Selena's probably just going to, Selena and I are going to jump in as necessary with Kathy kind of directing us.
Thank you, Derek, for that. So yes, we're so excited to be able to be sharing these best practices with you today. I want to mention that we will be having 1 or 2 more meetings before the end of February. And after today, if anyone has some more questions about Ready assessments, Andrea is happy to plan another meeting that'll go more of a deeper dive. And we also have a couple of webinars coming up. We'll have a 3-day webinar that's 2 hours each. That will be for teachers to use and to watch on demand. And each webinar will consist of the standards in personal finance, and they'll all be tied back to the National Personal Finance Challenge. So we strongly recommend that you share those with your teachers. And in February, there will be an Econ boot camp, which will also be tied back to the Econ challenge as well. So more on that later. But I know, you know, we've got a lot of materials to cover today. So without further ado, Kathy, are you going on first?
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Excellent.
Thank you. Just go ahead and start. All right, fantastic. So it's so exciting to see so many people here. I did just put in the chat my email and the shared folder that I have prepared to share with you guys. So I have some materials based on the requests and just conversations that we had before our winter break. I am going to go through some very specific steps that the Arizona Council took to transition our in-person competitions to remote. So I am going to go ahead and start my screen. Do I have those privileges to do that?
You should.
If I can.
Let me know if you don't.
It says disabled. So
I thought I did the setting earlier. I'll change that.
That's fine. And then I have a PowerPoint that I'm going to use just kind of to guide the my pieces here. But feel free to take a look at that. It's a OneDrive folder. If you can't access it, we'll send it as a follow-up link. But I have several documents in there. It might even be more than you want. But we really wanted to make sure that you guys had the ability to take what we're giving you today and make your remote competitions a reality. So I'll just kind of start with this. So Derek, you guys can see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay, so the Arizona Council, we call it the Mayor's Challenge. So our Econ Challenge and our Personal Finance Challenge, and we've added a third competition that we call the Critical Thinking Challenge, which is a case study in the economics area, kind of like the national competition does with the multiple choice and then a case study. So in the past, we've had all 3 of these competitions in person on the same day. And this is something that's scheduled typically for us early April. So when the pandemic occurred last year, we did not have a lot of time, but we were committed to wanting to convert it to virtual. So that's what we're sharing with you today is how did we convert what we had already planned to have 3 competitions in the same day to virtual. So what I want to share with you is what I think was part of our success of the steps that we took. And then I have documents that you can share that you are certainly welcome to use. So as you can see, what I have here is the very first thing that we had to do is commit to this, right? And to think about how are we going to convert the competition that we already had scheduled in person, including registrations and schedules and everything, to a remote. So we had been already had been using Zoom. So we early on committed to using the Zoom platform to do this. And so the steps we took, we created our Zoom plan as a staff. We then, and I'll share that with you, and that'll be the basis for my piece. We then realized that once we created our plan for taking this competition remote, we would need to train teachers and judges for how this was going to look in a remote environment. So we made sure to have a plan for that. And we then had a plan for how are we going to manage our Zoom platform? What were we going to leverage in the Zoom features? And then the day of the competition, we have a very carefully planned schedule. So that's kind of what I have here to plan to share with you. So feel free to put questions in the chat, and I'm going to just go through some of these pieces, and then we can pause, and Selena and Derek can add in as they see would be helpful. So the first thing is our Zoom plan. And so and I'm going to share that with you. I have these things ready to open. I'll open here. So the Zoom plan is in that folder. If you can open it, feel free. We have a staff, which was very fortunate. I'm the director of student programs. Elena Z is our CEO. Teresa Mungai is our director of teacher programs, and Jen Mazzillo is our director of operations. So we have 4 full-time staffers that was really very important in making this work. So our original competition is the Econ Challenge, Personal Finance Challenge, and then this Economics Critical Thinking. They happen all on the same day. We were committed to keeping that. So we decided that each of those competitions would have a separate Zoom meeting. So a separate Zoom meeting link. And the agenda for that day looked something like this. Let's see if I have that here. So I have and it's in that folder as well. So the agenda for the in-person, we tried to keep it as close as possible, and we wanted to accomplish all of this in one day. So we had the Econ Challenge the first thing in the morning, and then we had the Personal Finance and the Economics Critical Thinking were happening simultaneously. So we decided to stick to this schedule as much as possible. We're going to alter this a little bit this year and keep them all online, but do the Econ Challenge one day ahead, and then the Personal Finance and Critical Thinking on the second day. So when we did this in person, kids would come in to we did this at a local community college, and the students would come to a student union. They would have this orientation, and then we used like 2 buildings, like classrooms in all these different buildings. And so we had to think about how to put that into our Zoom plan. So each competition had a separate meeting. On this Zoom plan that I give you guys access to, I have some tips sprinkled in there, but I think I'll just kind of go through what the logistics look like for us. So the event setup was that when we decided to use Zoom, we already had registration done. That we contacted the teachers. We got the response that Zoom was something they could work with. And we decided to make our Zoom, each of the competitions have a pre-registration required. And with that, that just means when you set it up in Zoom, you indicate that. And we asked the participants to use a specific naming convention. The reason for that was that when they came in, and when I show you our schedule, you'll see why this was so important. They were staggered start times. So the teams were assigned a specific start time. And because they were staggered, we may be having people in a waiting room, in the main room, and in some breakout rooms. And so we really wanted to make sure we could identify our participants. So we asked them to use these naming conventions. Their first name was their team name. So maybe it's Econ Wizards, whatever team name they registered with. The last name field was their school name and their first initial and last name. We didn't feel like we needed the last names for the students. The teachers had registered them, and we were cross-referencing our registration lists. So that was really important. And I shared with you in the file that we had very specific directions that were sent to teachers that helped them to help their students register for the Zoom meeting. And then we utilize waiting rooms. So remember, the personal finance competition has its own Zoom link. And then our critical thinking competition, that's the case study piece of the Econ Challenge, had a separate Zoom meeting. So those, we utilized waiting rooms and we utilized breakout rooms. And I'm going to give you more details about that. So that was the event setup. Yeah, Derek.
Kathy, I just want to interrupt you and just say how big something little like that can be, the naming convention process that you just talked about. I know when I was going through the quiz bowl, everything went smooth because of that. You know, I could see really quickly who buzzed in, what school they were from, kept things straight in my mind as I was operating everything. You know, you're putting it on Facebook Live maybe or whatever else. I think, you know, that is a little thing, but it's a big thing, right? Some of these things I'm looking at and I'm going, if I'm starting from scratch going, oh my gosh, Arizona's doing this big, huge thing. You don't have to do that. You can do this small. You don't have to do as many things as Arizona's doing, but this one right here, I wanted to highlight that's something you need to star.
That's a really good point. So if you're just doing one competition, which of course is way more manageable, absolutely. And when we talked about this, some of us were a bit skeptical of could we get students to follow these directions, and we did. And it was very important because when we had, you know, several hundred students competing with staggered start times, and you know how it is on a Zoom meeting, sometimes someone might come sign in a half an hour early, but we knew who to let into the main room based on their registration, because that's how they showed up when they appeared in the Zoom meeting. So yeah, thank you, Derek. It was super important. So really there's two competitions I'll talk about here. Econ Challenge was not as challenging for us as the other presentation type competitions. So the Econ Challenge, we have 3 divisions. So the Adam Smith division, the David Ricardo division, and we do the Milton Friedman Middle School division. But we decided to do the testing all at the same time via Zoom. So students registered for the competition, for the Zoom meeting. We cross-referenced that, of course, with our registration. At the assigned time that we told them to log in, they were told to log in with their cameras on and their microphones muted. And we didn't use a waiting room here because we didn't have different staggered times. We had one time they were logging in. So we let them come into the main room. And when the time was to start the competition, we had 10 minutes or so built in to give them instructions. And we used SurveyMonkey to upload our tests. So we created our own tests. And the reason we used SurveyMonkey was a couple reasons. We've been familiar with it for our evaluations and some other uses. And so creating the test was that was the biggest chunk of time, is just typing in the tests, and it allows images. So we certainly could use graphs and charts. And we really like the export feature of the results. So it exports to an Excel. We can certainly use the same pivot tables and manipulate the data. So we use SurveyMonkey. Well, we had a different link for each test, of course. So one of the considerations was, should we have 3 different rooms for the Econ Challenge? But we chose to use one main room. So we had, you know, almost 200 kids in there, and then gave very clear instructions that they were to use the link that was matched to their division. And it worked. The kids, they left their cameras on, they tested. During the time test, we closed the survey at the end of the time. So you know, the security we just sort of an honor system. We watched them on the camera. We had a couple of co-hosts in the meeting that were sort of scrolling through the camera links to observe the kids. We told them they were being observed. And then they completed the test. Once they were done and they hit submit, they were told they can go ahead and leave the meeting. I'll pause there. Is there anything about the Econ Challenge that anybody has questions about? So that one's pretty straightforward. What we did at ACE, at the Arizona Council, is that each one of us were in charge of a particular competition. So Jen Mazzillo facilitated the Econ Challenge. I facilitated the personal finance, and Teresa Mungai facilitated the critical thinking case study. So Econ Challenge happened first so that kids could then still be compete in our one of the other two challenges, perhaps both if they wanted to, but that was less common. As far as the finalists, once we did all the tallying, which was in the morning, the teachers were told if they had a qualifying team for the final, which was the quiz bowl, and they were notified via Remind, which is an app notification system, and email. And then they were given the time that they were to log in. So we did and I'll go back to our agenda. Our competition schedule. So we did the Econ Challenge, the quiz bowl, at the conclusion of the other two competitions. And so we did our Milton Friedman, which was our middle school, via Facebook Live at 2 o'clock, and our David Ricardo at 2:20, and then our Adam Smith at 2:40. So those teams that placed there were notified and were told to log in 10 minutes prior. So the Econ Challenge, that was kind of the format. I also, in this Zoom plan, included for you, we divided up roles. So in Zoom, the host has, as you probably know, more, the host has more tools available to them in terms of changing roles, admitting people. So we divided up the roles and determined who would be a host and who would be a co-host, so that we could facilitate that test taking period. And for Econ Challenge, it mainly consisted of answering questions in the chat. If someone got bumped out, bringing them back into the meeting, and timekeeping and so on.
I see a couple of questions that are going in the chat that I wanted to make sure you addressed, and maybe I addressed as well. Did you do 3 different tests for each level, micro, macro, international?
We did.
Okay, that's what we did in Michigan.
So the Adam Smith and David Ricardo, they had the micro, macro, and international were all put together in the same SurveyMonkey. So there was the 3 different, of course, content areas, but at the Adam Smith level, they were 1 test. At the David Ricardo, they were 1 test. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So did you give them 45 minutes or an hour? How long did you give them? 45 minutes? Okay.
We gave them 45 minutes.
See, in Michigan, I broke it up into 3 different tests. So I brought everybody together, a little simplistic view of it, because I ran this on my own. I didn't have a team, right? So I brought everybody for David Ricardo into a Zoom room, and gave the introduction, said hi, here's the process, made sure everybody had their Zoom names and everything that basically Kathy's been talking about. But then I had them all in Schoology in a class, and the tests kind of were released on my mark. So I hit the button, it released the test. They had 15 minutes to do the test. And then after that, it was like, okay, we'll have 5 minutes in the Zoom room again. Give everybody a chance to go to the restroom if they needed to. And then I would say, okay, ready, go, and launch the second test. And I like that better, because it's impossible to police it, and you can have a shorter time period and less likely that they're going to look answers up in a shorter time period, because they just won't have the time to look them all up. Maybe they have a time to look up a couple, but not all of them. So that's the way I did it. It would, I think, be easier just to do 1 rather than do a test, come back, do a test, come back, do a test, come back. But you've got to think about what works best for you. So let's see what other questions.
Yeah, I see a few that are, and absolutely, I think, Derek, both ways, you guys have to think about what you can facilitate in terms of your staff. The question is about, the middle school division. We've been doing that for a while because we want to encourage participation and then kind of bring them up to that high school level as they stick with us at ACE. And so that's something that we've been doing since we started our challenges for several years ago. There was another question that I saw.
What about the attendance? The attendance, like I'm going to do mine on a Saturday this year.
Great question. Fortunately, last year we already had it scheduled, right? So they had already this was already scheduled for it. We do it on a Friday. It's basically when it's in person, it's kind of a field trip sort of thing. They were released from school. We find better attendance because it's also spring sports season at that time, and there's conflict with playoffs and certain sports and things. So we kept the date that we had it already scheduled for, as well as the time. This year we've planned ahead to do it remotely, and we're going to divide it over 2 days. Our Econ challenge is going to be on a Thursday, and then the personal finance challenge is on the Friday. So we're keeping it to school days, but we didn't change the date from the in-person day that was already scheduled. And I will tell you guys that we did have some students, some schools and teams withdraw because of the remote situation. They didn't feel prepared to get their kids up to speed on Zoom. They, at this time, it was so close to when the quarantine and pandemic started. Some teachers weren't confident every kid would have a device or reliable internet. And so we left it up to the teachers, of course, and announced to them that we were going to continue it, but that, and here was the format. So I would say we maybe had 20% withdraw, which, to be honest, we were pleased the number that stuck with us. We,
I see more people calling and asking me about it right now this year than I've ever had in any other year. We scheduled it for a Saturday this year just because you cannot get substitute teachers in Michigan, and you have to take attendance, and there's hybrid and everything's just a mess. So to take that variable out, we're doing it on a Saturday, and we'll see how it goes. Maybe we don't have to worry about the teachers as much, right? It's just the students who are really dedicated. So we'll see how doing it on a Saturday goes in Michigan. I didn't have any other volunteers. It was just me running Econ Challenge and Personal Finance Challenge. I know Arizona, you can talk a little bit more about the volunteers that it takes for you.
Yeah, I'll go into that next, actually.
Okay.
You're absolutely right that this was because the number of volunteers that we had committed in previous years, and there's no way we could have done our next step that I'm going to share with you without the volunteers. The one thing I'll say before I move on to that is that the teachers are not in the Zoom meeting, right? So as far as substitutes, that's totally something to consider. Could the students just be excused from their class time and do this remotely without the teachers having to lose instructional time? Probably, because the teachers are not invited to the Zoom meeting and to the competition. So our personal finance challenge was a lot more involved. And this component I'm talking about that we do, the critical thinking, they're very similar. So I'll just kind of refer to this as personal finance, since that's what most of us are familiar with. But our critical thinking is very similar. It's related to students and economic concepts, and they're given a policy issue. So this is something that is a presentation piece. And so in person, students would be, again, staggered, but they would be assigned a classroom where they would go prep. And then at their presentation time, they would have been escorted to the presentation room. So we tried to mimic that. So we used breakout rooms. I'm going to show you our schedule real quick, but because it's scary, I'm not going to stay on it very long. And then I'll go back to how we did this. But this is in the shared folder. So what this represents is that each of the teams, we had a total of 21 breakout rooms. But basically we had like 5 rounds. So you can see we had A through G, round 1, round 2, round 3, round 4, and round 5. And we just scheduled it where it was try to keep teams in the same divisions together. So the kids were still having prep time. So they came into the competition at their assigned time. They were led into the main room for 10 minutes. And this was all the competitors together. Then so I would be giving them instructions while my colleague, my co-host, is quickly assigning them to their correct breakout room. That's where the naming conventions were really important. So she would know each of the students in this team and assign them to breakout room B1. This team was assigned to breakout room C1 while I'm giving them instructions. And we found that there was enough time. There's a 10-minute time here. So they came into the room at 10:30. We gave them instructions for about 10-minute time. That's when we shared the case study with them through a link in the chat. And then we opened breakout rooms and told them to wait to join until they were told to at 10:45. And they moved to their breakout room to prep. Then they were in that breakout room for 45 minutes. And we used our broadcast system through Zoom that says, you know, how much time is left. We also told the kids to assign somebody in the room to keep track of time, so they knew how much time they had left. Then they were moved to the judging room that's associated with their same letter. So you can see here, prep room A1 was moved to judging room A, and they started their presentation at 11:30. This was probably the piece that required us to really focus the most, because we had so many staggered times. We wanted to make sure that the team knew the right times to move them. So we moved, the judges never moved. We had a team of judges assigned to room A, and they were there from the time they reported, which was about 10 o'clock, through their last presentation. They never moved. The kids moved from prep room to judging room. When they were done, they then exited the competition. So I go back to so I'll pause for questions or comments.
So Kathy,
And
Angela
I know there's probably, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Angela had a question. Is there a reason you didn't pre-assign them to the breakout rooms when making the Zoom meeting?
Yes.
And open them when ready?
The reason was a couple things. That Zoom was not quite as sophisticated at that time. And so we were still learning. And that we never ended the meeting. So we could only pre-assign the first group. And so, because you can only when you pre-assign, only who's in the meeting at that moment, at least this is our, you know, understanding, will actually go in there. And so it was so many students to pre-assign ahead of time. We weren't confident, one, that they would register correctly. We found that it was more manageable for the co-hosts, and I detailed these things for you here. One of the co-hosts that was not part of giving directions or anything, I'm sorry, it's the host. The host, even though that sounds like the main role, they were kind of a background role as far as presentation. They were in charge of every time we started a new main session, assigning the students to the right breakout room. So because we just kept that main Zoom meeting open for several hours, we found that pre-assigning was going to be more complicated than staggered assigning them. We didn't have to assign them the judging room. We just explained to them which judging room to move to. So they knew if they were in prep room A, they were going to move to judging room A. So I don't know if that answers that question, but the students did not have any issues accessing the case study. We were happy about that because they were in teams of 4. So I don't know if they all accessed it, they just figured out what at least one of them had it and could share a screen. We gave them all screen sharing capabilities. No one ever came back in to tell. We were in the main room. We left someone in the main room the whole time in case there was a question, but we had no issues with the students being able to open a link to the case study. Yeah, and Thomas added there, yeah, that it's definitely more robust. But so that's something you could explore. But remember that not everybody's coming into the meeting at the same time. And so pre-assigning them and then opening them up at the same time gets a little complicated. And we want to manage when they go into those breakout rooms. So we were scared a little bit because that was a lot of breakout rooms. For our personal finance competition, you could see that we had 7 groups going at one time, but it worked amazingly. We practiced a lot. All right, Derek, anything else there before I move on to the next piece?
I guess just the more simplistic way that we do it in Michigan is and it obviously can depend upon what our numbers are this year, but having 2 different breakout rooms for personal finance challenge case study presentations where the judges stay there, a panel of 4 judges for the breakout rooms, and they'll have times that the students will be going into those breakout rooms to present to those judges. And I like to do 2 different rooms for the presentations, and then it takes a lot of pressure off the judges. If I do more than 2, here's where it gets a little bit weird, right? So if I do 2, I can say, okay, this group of judges, you don't have to like really worry about your rubric so much and how your rubric might be being scored versus another breakout room. I just want you to find the best team that you see out of the 10 teams that you see, today. So pick the best team, and then let's figure out who the best team is in room A, the best team is in room B, and then we do our quiz bowl to determine who our champion is, even at the personal finance challenge. If we do 4 different breakout rooms because our numbers are really high this year, we'll just do a semifinal quiz bowl and then a finals quiz bowl. I just don't want to put too much pressure on my judges. I've got state treasurer, I've got newspaper reporters. I just want to make things simple for them, and they appreciate that.
Eric, they just emailed you, or you just talked to them after to get their scores? I was wondering how that worked, if they're all in different spaces scoring.
The judges,
Yeah.
they would basically clear out the room, so it's just them left in the room. They discuss, and then they personally write down that what they who they think's best. I basically say, okay, the first team that you see is the best team that you're going to see, right? And the next team is the next team better than the first team. And then each judge has their feeling of who was the best team. And I've never had an issue where they haven't been, out of those 4 judges, been able to pick out, yeah, that was clearly the best team that we saw today, and we're going to vote them onto the quiz bowl finals. So they don't have to, there's no complicated reporting system for that, and there's no score feedback to that team. There's a question and answer period where they can get some feedback from the judges, but there's not a great feedback system. It's simplistic, and one of the things you trade off is maybe a good rubric to be able to evaluate and look at what you did and how you did.
Yeah, that works too. We did do where the judges had a rubric, and yeah, it's probably a little bit more time commitment from them because we're asking them to judge. I think in this case they judged between 5 and 7 teams, and then after each session, after each team they judged, they emailed me the rubric, and so we compiled scores that way.
So
and there was some feedback.
We used a rubric, but it was an online form. So they didn't have to email anything. They just filled out the online form, and it automatically computed scores for us.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, the last couple of things I'll say, were just some tips. If this was complicated, we had a lot of teams. We had a large, dozens of volunteers, which we were lucky to have, and staff members that we were able to utilize. So it does take a little more manpower here. So it's tips for success is practice, practice, practice. We took time on Zoom to make sure we could do the breakout room maneuvering, and that we understood how to use the features we were leveraging. And we hosted a training for the teachers and the judges, and they were very willing to do. That was like 30 minutes at the most, about a week before, just so they knew about the Zoom registration and then the maneuvering between the breakout rooms. And so that was really a success thing for us. So any questions? We did use Buzz In Live for our Quiz Bowl buzzer feature. That was and basically, and I have that under the Econ Challenge, that we had a guest that was our host. They shared their screen, and Quiz Bowl Buzz In Live is kind of like a Kahoots of sorts, where it just has a code, and the kids put in the code and their name, and it only just gives them a buzzer. It doesn't put the questions on the screen. The host then verbally said the questions, and we would type it. I think we didn't even type it in the chat. I think we just said the question, and once they buzzed, they had to answer. So if they buzzed, prematurely, they had to answer it. If they're incorrect, she would restate the question. And then on a separate, like a PowerPoint, she had created a leaderboard that she was updating with the scores. So she was toggling back and forth between the Buzz In Live buzzer feature and the leaderboard feature. So Buzz In Live was it's not a robust system where you could put in questions, but it was a cool buzzer system where we could hear it. And then it prevented others from being able to buzz in until the presenter reset the buzzer.
Kathy, do you have your stuff on your Facebook page still from last year if people wanted to go dig into your Facebook and see that?
Yeah, the Arizona Council on Economic Facebook page. I will put that in the chat. Yes, and I can put the date on there too, so that you know when to go back to it.
Yeah, and if you go back to April for the Michigan Council, and I think Mississippi, Selena, do you have yours as well? Yeah. Okay, so it's something that you can go online and you can watch and see how it looks. And I think it's important to see how you set up Buzz In Live. and putting in Facebook Live with Zoom, if you pay for that that level where it gives you that feature. I think it's just the first like $15 feature that allows that to happen. But Buzz in Live, you kind of set up on the left side of your screen, the right side of your screen, you do the leaderboard, and how that leaderboard is set up, I think is very important as well, because it really keeps the person putting the scores in on track with the question, who got the points. So I think it's important to look and see how that document is set up by watching the video. And it's a very, very clear scoreboard. And so you have these two things set up, and then you just do a Zoom screen share. And one of the other little things that I thought was really nice that we did, I think, when I was talking to Jen and she gave me the idea to take a break and talk to the kids and kind of do a little quick interview with the kids. Everybody seemed to like that. If you watch the Facebook, and my in-laws that were watching said, "Oh, that was really cool," and you talked to the kids. So yeah, I would really, I would really encourage you to do little things like that. Stop and talk to the kids. Now, Kathy, and I don't know if anybody else could answer this. I just looked at Buzzin Live for the first time in maybe a month or so, and it looks like the free version's what it always was, and there's like a little paid version now. If you click create game, there's a free tier and premium tier. Now, free tier was what we used last year, and I think it would still work, and you wouldn't have to pay for the premium tier. But the premium tier looks like you can pay 99 cents and get the one-day key for the premium tier and do up to 200 players if you wanted to do something more with the whole group, if you want to do a big Zoom thing.
That'd be really fun. We use the free as well, because I think it accommodated up to 8 kids. And so you had 2 teams, and that worked. And I see a couple of questions. One asked about Facebook Live. It did not have anything to do with the contest. We wanted to engage parents and teachers, because in our in-person, they're there to watch the Quiz Bowl. And that was one of the most fun parts, was that final competition piece. And so we wanted to find some way that teachers and parents could, cheer their kids on. And so it was really cool, because they were in the chat, saying, go, Phoenix High School or whatever. And so that was really kind of fun. I didn't do the Facebook Live piece. Another colleague did, but I'm sure someone else can help out with that. And then the other question was about the conferring during the Quiz Bowl. So if I remember correctly, we gave them so many seconds. Once they buzzed in, everybody's on the Zoom meeting, right? So let's say that Billy buzzed in from his team of 3. I think they had like 5 seconds or something to answer. So they had a little conferring time right there. They still had to be pretty confident in their answer, but they were conferring in front of, the other team. So that was a little bit of something. They probably could also use their cell phones or something if they're smart, and how kids are. But that's how we addressed that.
Yeah, we did conferring. I'd say, okay, as long as I got through the whole question and somebody buzzed in, I said, okay, Javier from Pioneer buzzed in. You've got 10 seconds. I hit the button on my phone, watched the timer, said, okay, I need an answer. And they talked for those 10 seconds. And, they had somebody, whoever buzzed in, that was the person that was giving the answer.
I can also touch on how we ran it for the Quiz Bowl for the national competition. So for ours, we had all of our student teams on a conference line, and then we had one student spokesperson who was, it was a Zoom webinar. And so the other teammates were not on, in the panel, but we had one spokesperson who was there and would mute their camera while they were conferring with their team. And there was a conference time, and they would write down their answers and everyone would show them. So we didn't have a buzz-in system. It was just, who all got their answers correct. And we handled our scoring a little differently in accordance with that. All teams could earn a point on a question, and we had a scorekeeper who was feeding things into a Google Doc. And so if you have any questions about how to do something like that more in depth than we can, touch in these few seconds, I'm always happy to answer.
Awesome.
And I think, there's no one right way of doing it. It's maybe you take a little bit of what Thomas is saying and a little bit of what I'm saying, a little bit of what Selena's done, a little bit what Arizona's done, watch the videos and kind of come up with what works for you. But, know that you can do it. Know that you've got the support with the people that are on the call now and people that might not be on the call now that can walk you through it. I know that I called Jen Mazzillo in Arizona and I said, okay, my board members told me I have to do this. And so I wasn't so sure, but they were like, I'm like, okay. And so I called Jen, and, Jen and I talked for an hour, and, I kind of got the idea and that of how I needed to make it work. And you've got plenty of time ahead of time to set things up. And then the day of wasn't bad at all. I mean, honestly, because everything's already set, it wasn't stressful. And it was my first time doing a Facebook Live, and that worked fine. And now I've got more practice with it. The students are going to be more comfortable with it. You're going to be more comfortable with it, just because you've lived in this world for the last year now.
I think that's so true. Celine and I spent some time together, we're helping her, working together on getting Mississippi. And it was so fun watching her that day, and knowing that, we'd work together. And I think that one thing that Derek said that's so important is that teachers have been doing this remotely for a little bit now. I mean, I'm sure it's still just as challenging, but there's some more comfort level with device access, with Wi-Fi access, with platform compatibilities and features. So I think that Derek's right, that just really go for it, make that plan, and lean on people that are willing to help you out.
I am interested in the Buzz and Live for now. I'm trying to think like, okay, with a big room of like 100 or whatever participants, what kind of fun things could I do with that, for like door prizes, and, you could do little $5 Amazon gift cards, right? 10 questions, $5 Amazon gift cards, $50, and generate a lot of, I think, excitement with $50 and 10 questions.
Is there any other questions for me before I go get my COVID vaccine? And if you can't access, I'm a little nervous, but if you can't access the files in the OneDrive, please don't hesitate to email me. I'll make sure you can have those. But are there any last questions for Arizona?
Did anyone have any issues with internet, with their students and internet going out?
We had a few, because again, this was early on. And so we had a few where the students got bumped out, and we had given them instructions, just rejoin, we'll bring you right back in. And during Econ Challenge, we didn't, luckily, but it was in the group work. And so the group was still just kind of kept going, and their group member came right back in, and they were able to continue. So we didn't have, luckily, any issues that gave them a disadvantage or prevented them from being able to compete. But we did have a few that had, a little bit of a hiccup, but they knew just to come right back in, and we admitted them right back to their breakout room. Okay, good luck, everybody. I'm gonna sign off. It was nice to see you all, and I let me know if you want any more help from us. I'm happy to support you all.
Thank you, Kathy. And we're gonna stay on, and good luck with your sore arm tomorrow that you're gonna have.
I'll let you know.
My wife got the shot on Friday, so it was a rough Saturday for her, but then she was fine. So a couple of other questions that came up in the chat. I know that Jesse was asking about paid version. The paid version of Zoom allows for the Facebook Live feature. So that was one thing we paid for. We did not pay for anything else. We used the free version of Schoology last year, which I don't know if that's an option. Again, we're going to talk with CEE about the ready assessments here in a second. But the other Buzz and Live, I did not pay for the paid version. There wasn't even a paid version at the time last year. So I just found that out like during this call, and I went to Buzz and Live to show it if we needed to, that there was a paid version of Buzz and Live. So any other direct questions you guys might have before we talk a little bit about ready assessments and maybe how you could use that to deliver multiple choice tests if as an option instead of SurveyMonkey or whatever other pieces you might have. Classmarker.com for testing. Selena, is that free? Is that paid? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
There is a free version. I'm not sure how many users are allowed for the free version. At the time we had a paid version. I don't know that we have that anymore, so I'm not sure what we'll do going forward. But what I really liked about that, and some of these other options may do the same, but it graded it for us. So, you know, and threw it into a spreadsheet, and then we just had to manipulate it a tiny bit. We've used ClassMarker though forever for all of our challenges, even when we were in person.
Good, good. So that's an option to look at. But Andrea, did you want to talk a little bit about ready assessments? Do you think that would work for what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think it could definitely work. And your guiding questions were really helpful. So I'd like to, if I can, demo to show everyone on the call the different features and capabilities that it has, and to see if it, you know, might work for you and your student competitions.
Yep, just let me give you that power. Sorry, too many things open all at once. All right, Andrea, you are now a co-host, so you should be able to do screen share.
Great.
I didn't require lockdown browsers. That was just a question that came up because that was so early. That just seemed a little bit unmanageable to me. And some of these kids are using school devices that they don't have the power to be able to install lockdown browsers either. We had students that participated in the parking lot of their school in their cars because they lived in rural areas just to get internet. So there's, you know, they're smart. They'll make it happen. You know, if they could get it done back in April of last year, I'm sure they'll have no problem this year with those types of things.
Yeah, and that's a great point. With ready assessments, it's mobile friendly. So any student, when you assign tests or quizzes, they'll be able to access it from their phones. So know that they'll have a really great experience, and that's actually recently been updated. Okay, so can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to take out this chat box. Okay, so to access ready assessments, and just some background information, this is actually in beta right now, so it's not perfect, and we know that, and we would love any sort of feedback that we could receive from the team, from the network, from the council. Just know that we're continually working to improve this. And so if you can access this tool by going to econedlink.org/ready assessments. You'll click on access ready assessments and log in. I'm going to use my personal account to log in. And if you're not a member, then you would sign up for to become a member. Okay, so I'm logged in now, and I'm going to click ready assessments again, and I'm going to update my account and add what school I'm from. So from your perspective, you might need to, you'll have to roster your students for the competitions, which might require more work. But this system does, you know what, I'm going to go through a different way through our demo account. So ideally it would read my account and sign me in, but right now it's not working, but it will work for you, I promise. Okay. So That is actually the student portal. Just readyassessments.econedlink.org, but now I'm signed in. But what you saw was the student portal. And this is, so once you go through EconEdLink, update your profile, you'll get sent to this page. And this is the new Ready Assessments tool. And so you could see here the National Personal Finance Challenge pretest is available. And you can clone this test and add any questions that you'd like and personalize it. So you would go to add questions from question bank, and you could search for a question, you can add a new question. I can filter this by these grade levels, or I could filter it by concepts we have here as well. And we are working on cleaning up the content here and making sure that the tagging is working properly and this filtering is working properly. So you could know that you might run into some issues, and we're aware of them. But report them if, you can always email me and report that, and we'll make sure to address your needs. But you can also search by standard, and we're working to improve this filtering experience as well. So we're doing some we have some, cleanup to do, but this is available and it's ready for you to use. So I could add a new question to the test if I wanted to. And it adds it at the bottom. You can also change the order and drag and drop and use that filter to change the order. And I'm going to publish the test. And that's what's, all of these standard tests are available now. You could also create your own here and select from the question bank as well. So there are already over 1,200 questions here that you could choose from. So the filtering would be really helpful. And you could also even add your own questions as well. So there are multiple question types. There's single, multiple choice, association, fill in the blanks. So you have a variety of choices here that you could select from to test the students. And that's the content that we offer here.
I like the idea of ordering. I could definitely see ordering being useful during this type of testing.
Mm-hmm. And I would definitely encourage you to try these different types, fill in the blanks. There's fill in the blanks with drop downs, even, drag and drop as well, to differentiate the questions. You are going to have to roster students. You can bulk upload up to 1,000 students, and you can create classes for them or groups as well. But you definitely, I can walk you through how to create it, but you would have to download the Excel template. I have a sample template here. First name, username, password, and class name are required. So there's 4 fields that are required. And you'll be able, we created a CEE class with 3 students here. So once you upload this into the system, it'll automatically populate. Another nice feature is that there's a notification as well that you could send to that group of students through the platform.
So Andrea, just a quick question. So I'm thinking if we're uploading something and I'm going, okay, these are David Ricardo kids, that would be like a class, David Ricardo. And then within that, I would do groups for the different teams. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and you can do that. You can assign specific tested groups. So I put NPS and PFC competition 1, and I added 2 students to this group. And you can assign specific assessments to those groups and even to the class. So you can the groups are like a subset of what you can consider as a subset of the class.
Okay.
So you can use it in a variety of different ways, whatever fits your needs. We also have class performance. So I know that you wanted to compare the different groups, and groups would actually fall under class as well. So you can compare, you know, that it's auto graded, so you don't have to do anything. And you can compare the different tests and how well they performed on those between the different groups. And you can look at individual performance, student performance as well. But this is dummy data.
I can see that being useful, like even something like where, okay, if I have everybody registered by April 1st and my competition isn't until April 21st, I could, you know, send out a test to everybody, just like a general test of economic knowledge on April 10th and say, you know, hey, get ready for it. Here's the platform, you know, get comfortable with it and test your economic knowledge at the same time. You know, so that seems very useful.
Yeah, and the nice thing is that, you know, you will have to give the students the URL to the system, but there are ways to notify students within the system. So even the different groups, like there's a notification system. And whenever you assign a test or any type of assessment, test or quiz, they'll receive a notification to complete it. So you know, it depends on your needs. Those are the main capabilities. We're also working on integrating with Google Classroom. So I'm not sure if anyone on the call uses Google Classroom, but that is a feature we're working on building out, and we're hoping to accomplish that by early February. So I'm not sure if that's useful, if anyone uses Classroom for competitions, but if you do, it might be a way to help you as well.
Oh, that's great, Andrea. Selena was just saying, you know, she uses ClassMarker because the kids can register themselves. And I did that with Schoology as well last year. I did think that was nice, but I guess a workaround would be, you know, you send a Google form out and get that information, get into a spreadsheet and upload it into Ready Assessment. So, I mean, it's just, you know, 6 of one, half dozen of another, how you want to do things and what works for you. I think I think we have a whole nother hour that we need to get into, and we need to schedule you, Andrea, to do this with everybody to walk us through Ready Assessments. So hopefully we can get you scheduled to do that at some point.
Definitely. And like you said, Derek, it depends on your needs. This system is capable of creating codes, but there's a different way. There has to be a completely different like system set up. So I think in the future, you know, that's something we could possibly do for the you know, these state competitions, and have something set up so we can deliver codes. Right now, this is what's available. But if that's a need and that's easier, and as state coordinators, you need that, we could, you know, build that out and make it available for next year. You know, whatever. This actually serves more for classroom purposes, but there are cases, you know, this system is flexible enough so that we can go that route if we need to. So just know that that might be an option for the future.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. It is 3:59. Are there any other final questions for anybody? Anything anybody wants to share before we call it finished?
Can we take just a minute to talk about those critical thinking
yes,
activities, just so that I don't get 5 calls?
You do that, Selena, because I don't do critical thinking, okay. So I didn't think about it. You do that.
Okay, so Sandy, if this is not what you were asking, you just need to point me in the right direction. But this is true for both. We do this for a personal finance challenge and for the Econ challenge. And so there is a critical thinking case study, and well, it's a case study, and it's not provided until the day of the competition. We give them a link. So this is part of the state competition. Everybody does it. They are given the link when it's their turn. They go into a breakout room where it's just the 3 or 4 of them along with a facilitator who is an adult. They're given the link for the case study, they pull it up and they work on it for a period of time. I think we allowed 45 minutes for ours, but you could do an hour, but 45 minutes is probably enough time. So that's how they do that, and nobody else hears what they're talking about, is because they're in a breakout room doing that. And then when they're finished, that's when they get moved into the judging room where the judges are. So it's pretty simple. Does that answer your question?
Not exactly. What I really want to know is, what does the case study look like? I know what the personal finance challenge case studies look like, but not Econ.
Right. Okay. So the one for Econ Challenge last year, I think we got from Arizona. They just shared theirs with us that they had used. And I was wondering if I could very easily share that link.
You can just
I'll have
walk
to
through it real quick. Just give me a rough idea of what they're like. And then I'll reach out to Selena or one of the folks in Arizona and say, let me have your case study from last year.
Yeah, honestly, it's been so long ago now, I can't even remember what we were asking them to do. I do remember that it had something to do with economics and the environment, so environmental economics. I remember that much about it, but I couldn't tell you anything else about it.
So are they're given like a problem to solve somehow?
Right. And there were some questions at the end, I believe, that we wanted them to answer. We've done them different ways in the past because we've also done these as part of our in-person ones, and they might have had to do with, if it was appropriate, politics and the environment, politics and economics, just depending on what's going on with current events at that time is what I think is best, is if your case study addresses current events. And they just apply what they know about economics to the problem.
So if anybody would like to share their case study, I'd be happy to see them, and I'll drop my email in the chat box here.
And
I'll send you this one.
If anybody's looking to make their own case study, I don't do the case study, but I was just thinking you could start off by looking at the economic mysteries that are included on the CE thumb drive from Virtual Economics. That might give you some good ideas, or even a basis of a starting point for a case study, is the economic mysteries that I believe it was Mark Shug wrote. There's, I think, maybe 30 or 40 different mysteries there. My students have enjoyed going through them in class in high school, and they seem to be handling it quite well. And it really leaves it open for some good kind of presentation and analysis, and being able to bring in other supporting things for whatever they're doing for an argument. So economic mysteries is in the Virtual Economics thumb drive if you're looking for that.
Sandy, we also have a couple of case studies that we can share with you, but I want to mention to the whole group that we have done 2 recordings that basically show this past year's critical thinking round and the case study. So one for the NAEC and one for the NPFC. And then they're followed up by Jennifer Davidson for the NPFC and Jane Lopez for the NAEC, talking about highlighting kind of the great things that the students did during the presentation. And also Susan will, I don't know if you want to chime in, Susan, we'll be doing something similar with this 3-part video recording that's going to be on demand later this month. So Susan, if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So my students competed when I was still in the classroom back in 2015 in the Virginia Council's Governor's Challenge in 1, and we went to Kansas City. And Roseanne and Caleb approached me to help out with the webinar series that's coming up for the Personal Finance Challenge. So in that, what Dr. Heath and I have done is we presented 2 lessons. Julie presented the standard, and then I did the tie back to the case study itself. And then I asked Jennifer for permission to use the 2018 case study for the national challenge. And I approached it from the teacher standpoint on kind of how to tie back the instruction of the lessons that we did and then how it applies in a case study. So I would encourage you to have the teachers look at the Econ Ed Link signups for the webinars when they get released. In addition to that, I gave in one of the slides, it was kind of like steps for success or whatever. One of the things that I did with my kids to prepare them for the year that they actually won is, we didn't win in 2014, but what we did was we looked at the rubrics and the feedback from the judges and improved upon what was missing from that. So that was one thing. And then my approach with my kids always was practice makes permanent. So one of the things that, you know, I suggest is allow your students the opportunity to practice in a time constrained environment. That will definitely help them. And then the other piece was, my kids really specialized. So one of them said, okay, I'm going to handle issues with credit and debt. I'll do the investing piece and whatever. So they built that level of trust with each other to say, yeah, I'm going to tackle that part of the case study. And when it came to the presentation piece, I also told them, when you go before the judges, you have to be able to explain why you recommended something and then be ready for the follow-up question that came with it, because there could be that. So it, and then they practice. So there's plenty of opportunity for the kids to really apply the skills that they've learned all year. But my suggestion is give them as many shots at practicing, and they really will become very, you know, dialed into time constraints, presentation, not saying too many times, standing up properly, you know, so they're not hunched over, all the things that, you know, we would want them to be able to do and feel confident. I think that confidence piece is a big one. So I would just encourage you to, if you have time, get in there and do that. And again, if there are any questions, I'd be happy to help with that. So.
Thank you so much. All right. Is there anybody else that has anything they want to share before we call it a day?
I have a question.
Yes.
Joy. Somebody put in the chat, and I didn't see the answer, whether any group used team collaboration in the preliminary tests, the way the micro, macro, and then international and Econ Challenge often had in the past been set up with collaboration in that third test.
Yeah, that was a question asked by a couple of people. I did not. I did it individual. I don't know, anybody else have any experiences?
I think it would be tough. It was always a fun thing to watch students do. And then my other question related would be, typically if you have 4 people on a team, were you computing scores for all participants or dropping the lowest score, if, you know, counting maybe the top 3 and dropping the lowest score? Did people include that feature?
I dropped the lowest score, but I think it's really up to you individually if you want to or not still. So I dropped the lowest score, and you know, you could still, going back to your previous question, you could have breakout rooms during testing and send the kids to breakout rooms if you wanted them to do the 3rd round of testing together. So I mean, I see that as being a possibility. Maybe last year people really weren't that experienced to be able to handle it, but I think this year, if you wanted to do it, I would. Last year I wouldn't have been confident doing it so much. This year I think I would be confident the kids could handle it much easier because even Microsoft Teams just added breakout rooms. So I think most every student has had some experience in a breakout room at this point, I would hope. But yeah, I think you can still drop the lowest score from the spreadsheet. I mean, most every tool, whether you're using ClassMark or you're using anything, you're going to be able to export it as an Excel spreadsheet and handle it however you did before.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We can also share with the group all of our judge instructions and rubrics that have been used in the last couple of years, and particularly this year. So we'll put it on the affiliate Google Drive, and we'll send a link to anyone who doesn't currently have that.
And I'll make sure that we get all of that collected in the next 24 hours or so, and we'll send a follow-up email to everybody who is registered with the link to the recording, to the link to Kathy's Google Drive, and the CEE information that was shared today, and anything else that we might have to share with you. So we'll definitely follow up with some communication and information from today. Okay, all right, I think we'll wrap it up right now. Thank you guys so much for your time. Hopefully you found it as worthwhile of your investment of that hour. Rosanna and your team, thank you so much for CEE and everything you guys do to create this excitement across the country for economics. And I'll be available and be able to help anybody offline if you need help as well. So Selena, thank you for sharing. And as always, Arizona's a great leader in our field. So thank you to Kathy as well, and everybody in the Arizona team. All right, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.